Most people think they need more colors, more shapes, more textures, and really tight drawings, and watercolor landscapes just feel stressful. But with snow, it's the opposite because you remove all of that and suddenly it feels like cheating. Hi, I'm Françoise from Painting and Chocolate. I'm a full-time artist, and here we keep things simple but still serious for those who want to improve. Today I'll paint 3 simple landscapes with just 2 colors and show you 5 little cheats that make them much easier to paint. So if you've been scared to paint landscapes, stick with me till the end because this is the perfect moment to start with snow. And the first cheat is that you can use a 2-color mix for almost everything, and I've shown this in recent videos. Imagine how simple painting can be when you only have to think about 2 colors. Here, for instance, I've got ultramarine blue, which is beautiful for skies and shadows, and quinacridone deep gold. That second one isn't just for warm accents in winter, it's also great for sand, tree trunks, animal fur, lots of things. And that is just one magical combo among so many others. Where it gets interesting is when you let these 2 pigments do all the work. When I mix more blue into the gold, I start getting all these soft greens. That is just the yellow hiding inside the quinacridone deep gold reacting with the blue. And suddenly I can paint foliage, grass, distant trees, still with the same 2 colors. And if I take that mix again, but much thicker and more concentrated, and I push it slightly more towards the gold, I get deep browns that are perfect for cabins, tree trunks, wood posts, things that I would find in landscapes. So in this one limited palette, we already have the white of the paper for light and snow, the 2 bright colors and greens to keep everything alive, and the rich browns that will make any painting pop. Fewer pigments on the page also means way less chance of making mud. And the big idea I want you to feel here is that 2 smart colors can easily do the job of 10. It's easier for you, and your painting actually looks more intentional, not less. Cheat 2 is to use 1 big wash of paint to complete 80% of the scene because, as many of you have noticed already, you don't need to paint for hours or stack dozens of layers to paint beautiful watercolors, and that's especially true for landscapes. That's why you often see me and a lot of landscape artists start on wet paper. I wet the paper well, and then I block everything in with big shapes using that main mix. If you're new, start with more water and less pigment and slowly add more color as you see where things should go. That's exactly what I'm doing here with this first demo. I'm placing the sky and the snow shadows all in this single layer. And notice how much the brush strokes already do for me, like the ones that gently converge towards the center of the sheet because they give the sky movement and direction with almost no effort. Sometimes they're straight strokes, sometimes they're a bit curved, and sometimes I just tap the brush on the paper. Together, that already creates a believable scene. This one wash paints most of the work for you. Soft slopes, simple shadows, so you can move fast, get a quick wow effect, and it removes a lot of the psychological freeze that beginners have. So tell me in the comments what scares you more when you paint landscapes, and that will help me make more useful videos to help you out. Cheat 3 is that for landscapes in particular, there's no complex drawing to worry about, and it's the case here. If you look closely, there's basically no sketch, and when there is, it's very minimal. With snow, it's really hard to mess things up because it doesn't have to look one certain way, like a human nose or an eye. And you don't need to paint most of the page, and that's why winter is such a good time to improve watercolor landscapes. The goal and what you can focus on is to suggest, not carefully draw everything. And with snow landscapes, a few simple shapes and good shadows are enough. For example, take those faraway trees I'm adding with the same two colors. It's all it takes to complete the scene. I add a lighter green base first, then I use the thicker, more brownish mix to add the darker accents. And when I darken just a few parts of the middle group of trees, they suddenly feel closer than the softer trees on the sides. And that's how powerful tiny touches are. Even in such a simple painting, the shadows are what gives you realism and stop the scene from looking flat. Practicing on little snowy landscapes like this one will give you space to pay attention to these things. Color value, suggestions, depth, which are exactly the things that take your watercolor from okay to beautiful. At the time I'm posting this video, I'm running a Black Friday sale with 30% off all my watercolor and watercolor pencil courses until Sunday, November 30th at midnight Eastern Time. So if you want to go beyond simple demos like this, my courses are built as structured journeys to help students improve. We paint series of related pieces, so each lesson builds on the previous one, and you really see your work becoming more advanced over time. So if you like this simple snow approach and you love a clear step-by-step path, check the link in the description. There is a 30% Black Friday discount waiting for you there. Now let's move on to cheat number 4 with a second landscape, and you'll see I'll be keeping this one minimalistic. Just a soft base of snow, and then a few patches of grass, and the bottom of a mountain that's barely visible in the fog. Again, I start on wet paper with those same paints and brush strokes. And just like before, this first wash gives me about 80% of the landscape. The magic in this painting here comes from color temperature and one dark focal point. So right now, all the shapes I've painted look very distant because I used a lot of water. The magic in this painting here comes from color values and one dark focal point. And right now, all the shapes I've painted look very distant because I used a lot of water. So to make something stand out, I go a little darker. So I paint these simple wood posts on dry paper with a thicker, warmer mix leaning more towards the quinacridone gold. And because the paper is dry, the paint stays crisp where I put it. That sharp edge, combined with the warmer color, immediately pulls your eye to the posts. If you know the rule of thirds, you'll notice I placed the posts on one of those intersection points. It's a small thing, but it makes the painting feel balanced, without you having to overthink composition. I still use this in almost all my landscapes. No clutter here, and with just a few well-placed posts in a good spot, it makes the scene easier to paint and easier to read. Even with all this simplicity, you can still practice realism in the focal point. That's why I darkened one side of the posts a bit more, and now I'm using the tip of my brush to add slightly broken wire lines between them. And then I drop in a few tufts of grass and tiny splatters in the snow for texture. It's still only 2 colors and lots of paper white, but you end up with a clear focal point and a very satisfying little painting. Cheat 5 is that snow is the perfect playground for practicing edges, but also water control and navigate mistakes. For this third landscape, I'm going a bit more detailed with a cabin in the snow. I still start the same way. Light on wet paper, just suggesting the big shadows and slopes first. Stronger details like the deep shadow under the cabin or the darker snow in the back come in a second layer on dry paper with less water and more pigment. And I let the blue show more here so the contrast is stronger. This is where you hit what I call the ugly stage, and it can discourage a lot of us when we begin watercolor. The background looks a bit odd. There are strong shadows and gaps of white, and it just doesn't look right yet. That's usually when beginners think they ruined it. But with watercolor, and especially with snow, you don't have to stop there. You can simply re-wet the paper and adjust the shapes and edges. I do this all the time. And snow is ideal for practicing this because it's just ultramarine blue and the white of the paper. You're not juggling 10 colors at once or a very detailed background. Then I move on to the cabin with quinacridone deep gold. By slowly mixing in more ultramarine, I can go from that bright golden color to very dark browns, and that makes the cabin really pop against the snow. And notice that suddenly the big shadow beside it starts to make sense too. A few small extras help a lot in landscapes too. For example here, I add highlights on the cabin by lifting paint. I wet tiny areas and dab them with a paper towel. And I even use a touch of white gouache on the roof where I want the snow to catch the lights, and that's it. All those mistakes and adjustments simply disappear into the painting. No one can see what went wrong. All they see is a finished scene that works. And I believe it's going to make beginners feel less scared to try again, and that's exactly how to start improving. So it's possible to tackle more complex landscapes later. So if you've enjoyed this video and this last painting, you'll find the tutorial on my Patreon. And if you're watching around Black Friday, remember to grab your coupon for the 30% off watercolor and watercolor pencil courses in the description below. Thank you for watching the video. Here's one of the kind you might enjoy, and I'll see you next time.